What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Filsinger Games Character Spotlight with Mike and Brock.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Brock. And for 2 weeks in a row, we're joined by Jeff Manning, whoever that
How,
is.
how's it going?
What's going on, Jeff? Today, we're talking about a legend tonight, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, chosen by Mike.
Yep.
This
This
part
was
of our
my pick.
Legends of the Galaxy series. So how this works is we share our memories of the wrestler, how we would like to book them in a Legends Fed, and then how we would send them into the future and work them into the Champions of the Galaxy.
Yes. It's my guy. I'll go first.
All right.
The first time I ever remember seeing him, I was at a friend of mine, Lance, who had satellite television. That's how we used to watch, NWA and UWF stuff back then was through satellite. And I just remember tuning in, and all I hear is Jim Ross going, "It's Dr. Death Steve Williams. It's Dr. Death Steve Williams." And he was coming to make a save, and he had his arm in a cast because the Freebirds had broken his arm in a chair. And I can't even remember who he was saving. I'm like, I'd read the name Dr. Death, but I hadn't really seen him. And then I'm like, ooh, this guy looks pretty cool, big badass dude. And then I rented a video, and it was best of, I think, Mid-South or something like that. And he was wrestling in that, and it was a bunkhouse battle royal. And he showed up wearing football equipment and a football helmet. And he's going around just headbutting people with a football helmet. And he won the battle royal.
So he cheated.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. Hey, it's a bunkhouse. And I just became a big fan of his and his strong style.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd watched so many matches of him in Japan, and some of them like that's when I first saw him to do the backdrop driver on Misawa.
Okay.
And I did that. And then the guys knew, I got lots of friends knew who's Steve Williams. And, growing up, I had posters on my wall, Bruiser Brody, Ric Flair, the Road Warriors, Steve Williams, and the Honky Tonk Man.
The greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time.
One of those things don't belong, but,
Gunther's coming for him.
but Tim Dalton was down, at some wrestling show, and Steve Williams was there, and Tim bid on a bunch of stuff that Steve Williams, like it was basically a Steve Williams gift basket, and so he got me a hat.
Oh, cool!
But the hat is signed.
Nice.
That's cool. What hat is it? What's it got on there? Oh, it's like a Jolly Roger.
Yeah, and then on the back it's the Dr. Death.
Very cool.
And then I picked up his book.
Okay.
What's really neat with this is because I read this and I read Road Warrior Animals book back to back.
Okay.
Both books cross over in stories.
Oh, that's neat.
Because Dr. Death was one of the reasons why Hawk became an addict.
Oh, that's nice.
A lot of drugs together.
Oh, no.
And, Steve basically apologizes, about it in the book. He's like, yeah, we did this and that. And then, he finds God and he apologizes to everybody and what happened to him. And
well, his situation in the book is, and I haven't read the book in its entirety, but I've seen excerpts from it. It's very similar to Eddie Guerrero's. It's like a redemption story. But sadly, if you've read it after he passes, you know how it ends.
Right.
Because that's how Eddie Guerrero's book read too. I mean, it was a redemption story about finding God and, not giving into your vices anymore. But then it's like, well, it was too late. It already attacked their body too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he talks about how he beat cancer.
Yeah.
But it came back.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Another one that died way too young.
And he talks about his, that thing that was just so stupid, that Brawl for It All
Yeah,
ruined his WWF.
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah, I had that up on my list too of things to talk about.
You know, because he had it where he was the guy that was going to kick out of the stunner. Like, it was all set. You know, it was going to be a big deal for, you know, he was going to be the big stepping stone for Steve Austin, but they got to build him up for it.
Right.
He was going to be the guy to kick out of the stunner. And after you lose to
Goofy Bart Gunn.
Bart Gunn.
Yeah, I read that he went in his contract when he came to WWF. One of the deals was that he was going to have a 6-month feud with Steve Austin. That was in the agreement.
Yeah, Jim Ross confirms it. Like it was a done deal.
Which is odd because Steve Austin's real name is Steve Williams.
Well, I was listening to Steve Austin's podcast, and he talked when he first broke in. You know, he broke in Mid-South, and they're like, you know, do you got a gimmick name? He goes, I'll just use my name. Well, what's your name? Steve Williams. And they're like, no, we have one of those. And I think it was Dutch Mantell that came up with the Steve Austin.
Okay.
For Steve Austin. So, what did you guys, your impression of Doc?
Growing up, I only remember him as being part of the Varsity Club in WCW. It was a good run and everything. I was really excited when he came to WWF, but then it all got cut short because not only did he get knocked out in that Brawl for All, he got injured pretty bad too. So it kind of squashed all his momentum. I remember reading on the internet that he was coming, and I was real excited because I'd heard about this guy in the After magazines for years and never really got to see much of him. And then I heard he signed a WWE contract. I'm like, oh, this guy's going to be a big deal. And then that whole thing went down, and it just squashed it.
Yeah. He's one of the few guys too. I don't own very many wrestling figures, but I got his. He's in the red and white singlet from his WWF.
Yeah. Was it a WWF figure?
Yep.
I thought they made one of him.
Is that all you got, Brock? You lost in the shuffle?
He was lost in the shuffle, unfortunately.
No, I mean my experience. I'm a little bit younger, like Brock is, than Mike, and I think my experience was very similar. I knew the name. I read about him a lot in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. To me, he was one of the much like Masawa and other guys I read about in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It was like, oh, I would always like to see this guy wrestle, but I mean, those were the days you didn't see them. I just read about it.
Yeah, right.
I remember him appearing on WWF television. I was like, I don't see the big appeal. It just didn't hit me as like he was going to be a big deal, even though he came. I mean, I just wasn't impressed. It wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting with my experience of guys that were bigger like him, that I was knowledgeable of, I was expecting an entrance like Big Van Vader. And then I get this guy in a wrestling singlet, and I'm like, I didn't get it. I didn't get it. I mean, I compared him more to like a King Kong Bundy than I did a Big Van Vader, which Vader I thought was very agile and strong, and Bundy, he was a big guy. For Williams, I didn't get it. I didn't get the appeal when I first saw him, and then he faded off, and I wasn't really shocked.
Yeah.
I do like reading about wrestling and stuff, and obviously that's where a lot of my knowledge of him. I didn't see a lot of his matches outside of WWF, a little bit of WCW, but not anything stood out. Things I found interesting about him. Number one, the Dr. Death nickname was a nickname from junior high wrestling.
Yep.
He had shattered his nose and he had to wrestle in a goalie mask, and his junior high wrestling coach gave him that. The other thing I thought was really interesting is he had, I believe, the last pinfall victory over Andre the Giant in 1992. Oh, wow. It was the last pinfall victory over Andre, from what I had read.
That's cool. That's impressive.
So that was something I didn't know.
Yeah, he's got some neat stats. Like he's one of the few guys to letter in 2 sports. Like he did it in football and wrestling. And they said he could have made the Olympic squad, but he wouldn't give up football. Because I guess there were a couple guys in the same weight category. There was the guy who won gold medal for the U.S. back then. I can't remember his name at the moment. Dan Severn and Steve Williams, and they all competed against each other in university level. And Williams had won 3 NCAA championships, which isn't too bad for a guy who's only wrestling part-time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was reading that, I got the date, I brought it up, June 5th, 1992. He beat Andre. Andre gave him a handshake in the ring during his, All Japan Pro Wrestling, basically passing the torch to him. The other thing I didn't know about him was that how close he was to Giant Baba. I just didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a match I saw, and it was the Miracle Violence Connection, which is such an interesting name for a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
Stands out.
They're taking on Andre and Baba. And you want to see a match where 2 guys are selling for 2 guys who can't move.
Yeah.
Like they're doing all the work to get beat up because those 2
Yeah.
guys just can't move anymore. and the fans even understood what's going on.
Yeah. That's funny.
And I saw that on YouTube. I'm like, really? That match exists? Look it up. It's right there.
Yeah, he said he saw Baba like a father figure because his dad passed away in the mid 80s. And Baba kind of took him in and watched over him during his early days in Japan and all that. And
that's cool.
So I didn't know that connection with the Legends games. You always learn things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember when his card was getting made. Tim told me that him and Chad were discussing it, and I was like, if we don't make this card tough, Mike is going to kick our ass. And I don't have the color card. I want to grab it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I have the black and white one, and I know Kevin Butcher used it to beat Chaos.
Really?
That's cool.
There one tournament at a Galacticon. Kevin Butcher used Steve Williams and he beat Chaos.
Cool.
I didn't think his card was that strong.
It's all the dice.
I thought the raw ratings he was like a high 30, maybe a low 40.
I don't know, but
I don't remember, but it's been a while.
I think he's got 2 finishers, and that's what might have done it.
Could be.
Kevin just kept rolling 5s and 6s. We'd have to ask him.
I'm sure we can. He's not a hard one to find.
Nope.
No.
No, the
Here
other
he
thing,
is, right here. No.
and now, the other thing I thought was interesting, I always like looking up like the pop culture references and stuff. They said that there was a video game, and I don't know how many of you guys had this. I was huge into it when it came out, the Sega Dreamcast. It had an awesome NFL game, NFL 2K, and it had Crazy Taxi and stuff like that. I guess there was a wrestling game, Blue Stinger, and he was Captain Dogs Bauer, was based on him. He had the black mullet and the beard, wore singlet, scruffy voice.
Nice.
Had a wrestling fan with a shirt in the game. Was known for his strength, and his backstory was he had dogs and also was formerly divorced with a daughter, which is to T Steve Williams' life at the time. So I guess that character was based on him.
That's cool.
Captain Dogs Bauer.
I never played that one.
I don't remember that game either. Blue Stinger, it was the name of it. The Dreamcast wasn't around very long.
No, I had one, but
yeah, I had one as well, but I don't really remember that game.
Me neither. And I would buy any wrestling game I saw.
I don't think it was a wrestling game, actually.
Oh, yeah?
It was let's see, an action
adventure
game. Oh man, the story follows emergency rescuer Elliot Ballade as he is stranded on the monster-infested dinosaur island, allying with fellow survivors and the alien being Nephilim to find their source of the monsters. Gameplay has Elliot navigating Dinosaur Island, fighting monsters using a variety of weapons found or purchased during the game and finding items to progress to other areas. So that was the game that had him in there.
That's hilarious.
Blue Stinger. I did not know that, but You can actually switch to playing as dogs, apparently.
Cool.
Take control of Elliot Ballade and Dogs Bauer.
Dogs Bauer.
Yeah. So if that's true or not, I cannot say, but it's in his like profile online. So first pop culture influence.
Well, how would you book him in your Legends feds?
I'd put him and Baba together as a tag team.
I think I usually when I used him was with Terry Gordy.
Yeah, Doc and Gordy are pretty legendary.
I liked the Miracle Violence connection.
Mhm.
I think it's an interesting tag name.
I think matches against Kurt Angle would be good. Some other like amateur type guys.
Danny Hodge.
Danny
another
Hodge.
Oklahoma guy.
Yeah, there you go. They could team that, do an Oklahoma stable with the two of them.
We got Gary Albright in the game.
I don't think.
I don't think he's in the game.
I'm not sure.
I know everybody talked about, if you had a Mount Rushmore of, tough guys, a lot of people have said Steve Williams would be in that top 4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know after Brawl for All.
Yeah, Bart Gunn's got to be in there.
That's a hard sell.
Got to get Bart Gunn in there.
That Brawl for All really did ruin how many careers?
It did. Like everybody got hurt.
It was an interesting idea, but then to put them against Butterbean,
yeah,
who,
and just murdered.
Yeah, it's like, well, he's a professional fighter. What did you think was going to happen?
His head almost turned completely around. He punched him so hard.
It's sad that so many wrestlers, that's their legacy, because Bart Gunn had a pretty decent career prior to that.
He did.
I mean, the Smoking Guns were probably the top tag team there for a few years.
Mm-hmm. They had Too Cold Scorpio in there.
Savio Vega, JBL.
Yeah. Godfather.
All got beat up by Bart Gunn.
I think and how I plan on bringing him in is with Ted DiBiase first.
Okay.
And then slowly, gradually, moving from DiBiase then into the varsity club, because we got
they're all there now.
And Spivey.
Mm-hmm.
And then move them into the Miracle Violence connection.
It's hard to remember who's all signed now. They've done such a good job of signing so many people.
They really have.
I never thought I'd get to that point where I didn't know if a person had a card released.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot, and they keep coming.
So that's how I'd end up using him, just as just basically himself, but just follow his career,
mm-hmm.
and then give him a few, a singles push here and there.
Yeah, you could put him against Dan Severn, Kurt Angle.
He did hold some singles titles.
Oh, he had a huge career in Japan.
Yeah, and the UWF, and then you had the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
So I mean, unfortunately,
I've seen the match where he beats Big Bub, where he beats it's a one-man gang for the UWF title, isn't it? Or is it right. Big Bubba?
I don't know.
I don't have him brought up anymore.
I
touched on all my points. I'm sorry, I'm a bad research guy now.
It's all good.
Let's find out. I can do that. UWF title history. And it's a picture of the one-man gang.
That was probably who it was then.
He won it from Big Bubba, though.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I don't remember Big Bubba having the title.
Only 4 champions. Can you name them?
Well, you just rattled off 3 of them. So
I think the other one is the other one Duggan?
It had Terry Gordy was the first champion.
Interesting.
He beat Jim Duggan in the tournament final for the title, and then one man gang, Big Bubba Rogers and Dr. Dusty Williams, and then it was done.
Yeah, because that's when it got sold to WCW, because they were gonna, merge all the champions. And it was supposed to be Flair versus Williams, and and the different titles and everything all match up. and it just never happened.
Now, how did that title only change hands 4 times? But I'm looking at their television championship, and it switched hands. I kid you not. It started in '84, in a 3.5 year span. It had 19 different champions.
Yeah,
They've hired to defend it every
tier title. You
episode.
don't want your heavyweight champion switching out all the time.
I know, but geez, that's a lot.
It is. They weren't around very long.
I remember watching an interview with Steve Williams on UWF TV, like on their program, and he's a heavyweight champ. And he goes, "You're fighting Eddie Gilbert tonight." And he goes, "Do you think you're And I think it was Jim Ross. He's like, do you think your title's going to be in danger? And he's like, no, because I'm facing Eddie Gilbert.
Poor Eddie Gilbert.
Man, this list of television champs is fun too. Can you name the first ever television champ in UWF history?
Sting?
Crusher Khrushchev, Barry
Nice.
Darso, beat Terry Taylor in the tournament final. Magnum TA actually defeated him in the semifinals, but the groggy ref gave the title medal to Khrushchev.
That's about right.
But also, I mean, Adrian Street had to run with it.
That's funny.
There's other guys on here that I know are in the game. I don't want to misspeak because I don't remember who all was in the game. But yeah, Nikita Koloff, he was just announced recently, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
He was the very last television champion in UWF history.
Nice.
And interesting.
Anyway, sorry. I go off on my tangents.
It's all good. It adds some sizzle.
I like researching things. I learn more about these wrestlers every time we talk, and that's what I enjoy about the history of wrestling.
Right.
See, for me, a lot of this, I go off memory, and then hopefully one of you guys can fill in any blanks.
I'm counting on Jeff tonight.
That's why I'm here. I just look stuff up. I don't know anything. But really, I grew up and we've talked about it many times before. If anybody's tuned in, I grew up in the Hulkamania era, the
Same.
WrestleMania era. It was WWF, and then my knowledge of WCW was an occasional rental from the local video store, and then my knowledge from the Japan stuff and all that was from reading magazines. So it's just the era we grew up in. It's not kids. Hopefully, we have a few younger listeners. They don't realize you couldn't just turn on a TV and have access to like fighttv.com and this and that, where you can see things every day and all the time. There's so much wrestling now. If you'd have asked me growing up if there would ever be this much wrestling on television,
yeah, it's ridiculous.
There's no way I would think that would even be a possibility. As a kid, if we'd have had a WWE app like they had recently, I'd have probably never needed cable.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy to think about that.
I remember, I started watching wrestling, I'm going to say 79, 80. Somewhere in there. And I still remember the first match I ever saw, and it was Ricky Steamboat.
Nice.
And he came off the top rope and did a flying crossbody. And I'm going to say it was either against Don Kernoodle or Bob Orton Jr.
Yeah.
And he got a pinfall there. But I remember that and just being hooked because my mom and grandma were huge wrestling fans.
There's a few things like number one. So I explained Steve Williams to me was kind of underwhelming when I saw him after reading about him for years. The opposite of that, if you were going to look at the exact opposite end of the spectrum, was Jushin Thunder Liger. I remember reading about him, and the very first time I watched his match in the early 90s, I was like,
yeah.
I wanted more and more.
Just the look of him and everything was different.
That to me was the opposite.
I met him years ago at a Ring of Honor show. And I ended up sitting with all the wrestlers just on a fluke. And he didn't do a lot of his high flying. He's basically a ring apron guy, and he came in for the pin.
Yeah, and then the other end of that, you talked about the first match you ever went. So I remember going to my first WWF event when I was like 5, I believe. My dad took me for my birthday, and I remembered I knew all the characters from TV. But one guy that wasn't on TV at that point, I mean, he had been on TV in the past, but I didn't know him because he wasn't a big player at the time. But I was in awe of him in person was Mr. USA Tony Atlas.
Yeah.
I remember seeing him in person. I didn't really know him because he wasn't. I saw the Junkyard Dog, I saw Hulk Hogan, I saw Hillbilly Jim. Those guys were there, and Big John Studd and guys like that. But they were all characters on TV right now. Tony Atlas had kind of faded away, wasn't really on TV. I had saw him in person and the giant traps and just everything, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, how is this guy not in the title scene? Like,
He still looks like that. When we met him at Philadelphia,
we
a
all
couple
met him in
years ago.
Philly the one year.
Yeah, he
I was
still looks
there.
like that.
I've seen him since then too at the
It's
Squared
incredible.
Circle Expo. Actually, I saw him just back in April. But no, I mean, that was the guy that I first remember seeing professional wrestler that I was just in awe of. Like,
Mhm.
they're larger than life. Like,
I
I mean, on TV I saw that, but this was completely different. This is a guy unfamiliar to me.
Yeah.
Seeing him for the first time in person, I was like, oh my gosh.
I'll give you a funny quick segue Tony Atlas story. And so they were building him up in Mid South, like that's where he's just getting his start. And he's supposed to just kill. They have him doing Power Man competitions and everything. And he has his first match, and he's working like a carpenter. I can't remember who. And Tony didn't want to squash the guy. He wanted to show off what he could do and wrestle and this and that. And I guess they put on a decent match. And I guess Lawler freaked out on him. And he goes, "We just built you up to be this monster, and you can't beat our local jobber in 10 minutes." So
Just trying to be nice.
and they literally had to take him away and then bring him back in a bit of time.
Tony hit him with that laugh. I can't even do it.
If you just watch the latest Junkyard Dog on Crave.
Oh yeah.
And how would you book him in a GWF fed, Steve Williams?
I just call him Dr. Death.
Yeah, I think that's obvious.
Put him with Thanos.
Yeah, I'd give him a job, and that's his job, because we talked about how there's not enough jobs in the GWF.
Occupational gimmicks.
I think that I go a different route just to be different because I like to do that. He was given the Dr. Death name because he was wearing a mask. What if he takes the mask off the splatter?
Ooh.
And underneath, he's actually a technical wrestler that was trying to get over with his brutality.
Yeah.
And it's Steve Williams.
I like that. That
You make him a masked assassin.
Yeah, you start with the masked assassin, then he takes off the mask, and then he's actually this known. Now I don't know what they'd have in the future of the Olympics, but this known technical wrestler that they're like, oh my gosh, it's you! Like, this guy won medals or won.
That?
Yeah,
I like that. That's cool. That's clever.
That is
Nice.
from
Good
Jeff,
stuff.
the guy who just follows a book and has no imagination. That's pretty good imagination.
I got imagination. I just don't like to use it when it comes to GWF. I like to compare my federation to other people's, and I think to do that you have to have somewhat semblance of the book.
Yeah, I get it. It makes sense.
It's just kind of fun. No, that's actually pretty good. Where you start him off as an assassin and let him go for maybe a couple years, and then he removes it. Do a Dragon Master.
Yeah, but Dragon Master was hiding a scar. And it wasn't really even that bad of a scar, we find out.
Yeah.
It was the cane. Oh my gosh, it's his face. He's gonna show his face. He looks like a normal guy.
Just superficial. A lot of scarred faces in Champions of the Galaxy.
There are.
It's a running theme.
I mean, Thanos, that was the whole theme of the original story.
Mm-hmm.
Gets a scar, and now I'm evil.
Then busting him wide open.
How many guys with scars are good?
It's a good question.
Well,
Got to be a few, right?
it depends on where the scar is, and like you look at Dusty Rhodes, and his head looks like
Yeah.
the interstate of America.
I was thinking more like Abdullah the Butcher with the fork marks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was supposed to have a match versus Abdullah. We worked out on a price because I was supposed to get bladed pretty, and I'm like, I'm going to do my own blade job. And they're like, no, Abdullah will do it. And I'm like, no, I don't trust Abdullah. Because Abdullah's, I guess, in the room with the promoter, and I'm just on the phone. And I'm like, no. And Abdullah got mad. And
Well, I mean,
Yeah, it's my head.
But if you don't trust the guy that goes by the butcher, who do you trust? That's what he's known for.
And so I, they're like, well, then you're not doing it. So they gave it to another guy named, I think it was Mike Loader who got the job. And Abdullah carved him up so bad the police were called because they thought it was gang violence, and he was the result of an attack because he had to get rushed to the hospital.
Abdullah was the original New Jack.
I'm like, huh? There's a reason I said no.
Why do I feel like I'm in the movie Clerks? You remember the scene where the contractor talks about not working on a job because he knew it was a mafia boss, and then his buddy takes it, and 2 weeks later he's dead. Yeah. And then I knew the risk. It wasn't worth the reward.
It's true.
It's
funny.
And brings us full circle back to Steve Williams. He did not know the risk in Brawl for Your All.
It's true.
Nobody
did.
Yeah.
They paid him extra though. I think everybody that was in that, they got an extra bonus or something.
Okay,
wasn't worth it.
Extra bonus versus feuding with Steve Austin in that time
your
period.
career.
Let's be honest.
They probably thought he was just going to go in there and wrestle people.
Well, he did.
Well, he did. That's how he tore his hammy or whatever it was.
Yeah.
He grabbed Bart
They
Gunn.
had to wear those giant 20-ounce boxing gloves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why Bart Gunn was able to knock him out, because he grabbed him, like grappled him, and like fell on him or something, and fell weird.
Yeah.
And then Bart just knocked him out after that.
He tore his. He went in for a tackle and he tore his hamstring, and then he stood back up on one leg and backed into a corner to fight, and then Bart just.
Yep.
So he had a torn hamstring and then a cracked jaw, and
poor guy. On that note, probably wrap this up because we're about out of time. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you have not yet, please click that subscribe button somewhere underneath Jeff. If you liked the video, give it a big old thumbs up. And while you're here, check out all our friends who make Filsinger Games related content, including the official Filsinger Games podcast, Roll Up, the Legends team's Uncharted Territory, Dizzy Dice from Lee Lamprey, the Filsinger Games Fancast from Grant. Here on YouTube, you'll also find Grant's solo promoter, Dave Little's Heartland Championship Wrestling. And after further review, over on Twitch, you'll find me. Hopefully we'll be streaming a bootleg fed here again on Sunday nights. And you'll see Matthew Butcher's Tiger Strike painting also on Twitch. So I ran through those all really quick. If you would like to include your link below, please let one of us know, and we will be happy to include it.
127 subscribers.
Woo!
And we dropped one week to 124.
Oh, who did it?
I know. Somebody left.
Well, thanks everybody.
Good night.